Today we're discussing the 2016 film Passengers, starring Jennifer Lawrence and Chris Pratt. In that order, weirdly. Why does Jennifer Lawrence get top billing when Chris Pratt was in much more of the movie and had a much better role, in my opinion? But she's the highest paid actress in the world right now, so let's not argue with logic. I recently watched this film and I loved it. I don't love a lot of movies. This movie actually made me feel something. It was kind of emotional. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. And I know it's not for everybody, but that's kind of why I wanted to write a review. It seems as though this movie is universally getting panned by critics. It's got a 30% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. That's horrible. That's from the critics. User reviews are a little higher, like in the 60s, but I think that's a crime. This movie has an original script. It has extremely good special effects, and it has some fantastic acting from the two actors I mentioned, and a few surprises along the way. I have no idea why it's getting such negative reviews. Well, I do have some ideas, and that's why I'm doing this. So the scope of this video is not really to review the movie Passengers. There's plenty of other places you can watch reviews or read them online. What I found when I saw the movie and when I read the reviews is that a lot of reviewers said the same few things over and over again when they were being negative about the movie, and that they were just overly harsh, and I felt like they missed the point of the movie. The movie wasn't perfect, but what it did really well. And I feel like just a lot of folks missed those things, didn't pull the things out of the movie that I did. So I want this to be more of a discussion, and it was prompted by the fact that I really enjoyed certain elements of this movie, and I want to make sure that other people enjoy it too. That being said, obviously we're going to talk in depth about the film. Spoilers, I'm going to assume that you've already seen the film. If you haven't seen Passengers, there's no reason to watch this video. Go watch it, come back to this afterwards, and maybe this will help you kind of sort out your feelings for the movie, put some things that you're thinking into words that you may not have been able to articulate. So that being said, let's go. There's really three main complaints that people have against this movie, and I'm going to go through all three of them, and in analyzing each, I think you'll understand not only why I think people are wrong about them, but why I enjoyed actually these elements. So thing number one, people had a problem with the morality of the movie. Chris Pratt's character, of course, does something unthinkable when he activates Jennifer Lawrence's pod ahead of time, thus condemning her to the same life of isolation and robbing her of her existence too. It's unforgivable. It's horrible. But you have to get past that in order to understand the rest of the movie. Number two, some people say that this movie is just a thin excuse for a love story in space and that it has nothing else going for it. The third thing is that people have a lot of issues with the final act of the movie, about the last 1/3 of it, where it kind of goes off the rails. They bring in Lawrence Fishburne. It turns into kind of an action movie. So I guess let's start at the beginning. So number one, the morality battle. I'll tell you what, have you ever gone on Amazon.com and read like the stupidest ass product reviews? Like someone who's reviewing a laptop computer battery and gives it a 1-star review because they bought the wrong battery and it wasn't compatible with their laptop. That's how I feel this morality thing is. You gotta get past it. This is the heart of the entire movie. Chris Pratt opens up that pod because he is alone. They establish very early on that he's a good character, that he goes through all the proper channels, he tries to contact Earth, he tries everything, and he waits 1 year and 3 months. Now, how many of you can honestly say that you would wait that long before opening someone else's pod? And these people take this moral high ground and they say, I cannot associate with this character. He did a bad thing. Well, yeah, of course he did a bad thing, but that was the whole point of the movie. And Lawrence Fishburne's dialogue sums it up perfectly when he says to her in just one sentence, he's like, yeah, it was a horrible thing to do, but a drowning man will always grab onto someone else who's nearby and pull them down too. It's not right, it's just humanity. And that's absolutely beautiful. That is why this movie works. It's the kind of plot that reminds me of a Star Trek TNG episode. They take one little moral quandary or one little nugget of some philosophical thing and they make a whole episode about it. What would happen if there was an entire race of people that decided they had to voluntarily end their life at the age of 65? What would happen if one person decided not to do that? What would it do to that society? Another episode, what if we could understand the vocabulary of an alien language, but not the syntax? How would that affect blah, blah, blah? This is the same kind of thing. It reminds me of Star Trek. What if you were stuck all alone on a desert island, but you had the ability to summon someone else to that island too, thus dooming them to the same life as you, but making your life less lonely? That's the whole point of the movie. And I don't think Chris is a bad guy for doing it. I think that most people would have done that, given that that's the whole point of the movie, that it is this moral quandary. Harping on him for this and criticizing the entire movie because of it seems really stupid. So what this makes the movie really about, to me, it's not about a love story. It's about everyone's most fundamental fear, which is the fear of death. Specifically, the fear of dying alone. I know this is getting a little heavy, but if you're not ready to talk about this, you shouldn't be watching this movie, right? If you're looking for a popcorn film, if you just want explosions, I think you've come to the wrong place, because this is really important. I remember when I was little and people used to ask me what my biggest fear was. I would always say tornadoes. I grew up in Michigan. We had a lot of tornadoes. But was it really tornadoes that I was afraid of? No, I was afraid of death, because tornadoes will come and kill you. And every other kid that you ask, or even adults, that say, I'm afraid of a mudslide or a fire or of a heart attack or something. Really, you can distill everything down to death. But really what people are truly afraid of, even more than that, is dying alone. And that is exactly what this movie's addressing. Chris didn't want to die alone. I think it brings up some really interesting moral questions about that, because he did consider the alternative, which is just killing himself. And, either way, there's a murder being committed. You cannot survive all by yourself, not even with the comforts of that spaceship, for the rest of your life, for 80 more years. Your life expectancy would be pretty long on a ship where it's got medical facilities and all the food you can eat and all that stuff. There's very little chance of you dying of natural causes early. Shoot, I didn't even see any cigarettes there. So it was an exploration of those things. That what would you do? I think anyone that berates the movie for having that moral sticky ground is really missing the whole point. And they're being sanctimonious fucks. Give me a break. If you really believe that you wouldn't be tempted, if you really think that you're in that 1% that wouldn't crack open someone else's pod, A, I don't believe you. And B, you'd probably be in that 1% that would have jumped out the airlock and just killed yourself. And I'm not sure that that's any better. Suicide still sucks. And at least this way they got to live together. So I think that this is the entire heart of the movie, and is what made it so interesting, and is what made the love story become interesting too, which of course leads me to part 2, the love story. So the movie's really divided into 3 acts. The first third of the movie is Chris Pratt's character all by himself, waking up, trying to assess the situation, trying to get help, trying to figure out what's going on. It's really cool. It reminds me of the movie Moon, if you've ever seen it. One guy alone on a space station trying not to go crazy. Chris did an excellent job with this, and there's a part of me that feels like that's actually my favorite part of the movie. The second act of the movie, of course, is when he wakes up the girl, and it's all about their relationship and her ultimately finding out about what happened. And then, of course, the final third, the movie takes a bit of a left turn, and that is about the disaster that happens on the ship, and it turns into a little bit of an action movie and kind of goes in a different direction. So we'll talk about that. I do have a couple of small problems with that part. But the love story is very important because it still reinforces that same philosophical tone that we're thinking about, right? He does all the same things with her that he did when he was alone. He takes her to the dancing game. He takes her into outer space hanging from the umbilical cord. And the only difference is she's there. And the first time he went into outer space hanging from the cord, he was crying. It should have been this life-changing, beautiful experience for him. But he got back inside, and that was the moment he decided he wanted to kill himself. Obviously, he was not having fun. Went again a year later with this girl, and it was a beautiful experience. They had so much fun. And afterwards, it was so exhilarating that they had their first kiss, and they got to sleep together for the first time. So what's the difference? The difference is who your company is with. Getting to do things with the people that you care about. It's so unbelievably important. You think about your day. Think about what you did today. I did some landscaping today. My girlfriend was working, so I staked some mango trees and just worked outside. And I'll tell you what, a week from now, I will not remember what I did today because it's whatever. I got some fresh air. It was cool. But a couple weeks ago, my girlfriend and I did some planting together. I got her into gardening too. We did some things together. It was awesome. it made me feel something. And it was the same activity just because it was with another person. So this whole concept is really, really interesting to me about, what are you really doing with your life? What is really important? Because on the surface, their lives are terrible. Their lives are ruined. She doesn't get to be a journalist. She doesn't get to write about all this stuff. He doesn't get to colonize the planet and become this great engineer that he wanted to be. They're stuck just doing mundane stuff, same stuff day in and day out on this spaceship, but they get to do it together. And if they're really in love with each other, that might actually be better, right? What's the value of the time that you spend? You can do amazing things in your life and go here and go there, or you can just sit on the couch with your girl or your guy and play a game or watch a movie, and that could be the night that you remember for the rest of your life. It's a really, really interesting moral quandary. And I love the way it was explored in the second act, juxtaposing his solitary experience with the experience that he had with her. I thought it was beautiful. And anybody that's just seeing the love story part of that is really missing the point. It's not about, they fall in love. It's about that difference. So another thing that I found very interesting when they were exploring the love story was, I don't know if you remember the first date that they had, where they went out to dinner and Jim says to Aurora, hey, sorry, I hope it's not too soon to ask you out on a date or something. And she goes, what took you so long? And he's like, I don't know. I was giving you space. It was really cute. But it was amazing how fast she fell in love with him. And it got me thinking. Now, this was eventual. She basically woke up, immediately wanted to fix the situation, took about a month trying all the same stuff Jim tried. And as soon as she gave up on that, as soon as she was like, all right, I guess we're stuck here, she started to fall in love with him. And I think that's very interesting. And it's not because they're perfect together. I think it's because that's what happens. Or is it? I think that's what the movie's trying to say. Just yet another cool little subtle message in there that if you and this other person were the last two people in the universe, you'd probably fall in love. You'd probably think it was real, unless you were completely mismatched or were 50 years apart in age or something like that. It reminded me of the Blue Lagoon. Remember those two kids that got stranded together? Of course they're going to fall in love. So that makes you wonder, what even is love? Is it just something that you feel for the people that happen to be geographically close to you? Just another one of these really cool things that the movie has a chance to explore. I feel about the movie that it doesn't set out to entertain you. You have to kind of bring your own fun, right? You have to think of all these things that I'm thinking of and watch the movie with a thoughtful mind and try to pull out all of these little messages that it's giving you. It's not going to entertain you with bombastic explosions or great action scenes or all the usual popcorn stuff. If you're not watching the movie thinking about what it's like to be these characters and be in their shoes, then you're going to get a lot less out of it. So I think expectations factor into it a lot. I think that's why it's got that 30%. People wanted to be wowed. They wanted to sit there, all right, movie, do your thing to me, But I was on the edge of my seat, and I was thinking about all this stuff, and I loved it. Well, then we move into the last third of the movie, and this is where it's a little complicated. So, of course, Lawrence Fishburne wakes up. The ship continues to deteriorate. They need to do something. A lot of people were complaining. This is especially where it seems like the critics had the most problem. It's felt like the last part of the movie was written by someone different. All this nice pacing that was set up. It's like, it turns into a brain-dead Hollywood action movie. I totally disagree with all that because the third part of the movie had three extremely important functions. First of all, it reconciled the two main characters. Let's say none of this had happened. She finds out that he woke her up early. She can't forgive him. Of course not. She's understandably mad. Her whole life is ruined. They're taking turns. Hey, Tuesdays are my day to go see the bartender. They're not going to talk. And really, realistically, nothing would probably ever break her out of that because the ship is so mundane. Day to day, everything's the same. There'd never be any reason for them to talk again. He would try a few times. He would give up. She'd hate him forever. 50 years would go by, and they would both die miserable. That's horrible. So this disaster gave them a reason to have to work together again and kind of start to heal a little bit. Otherwise, they would have never even talked. Secondly, it eased up on some of the moral tension that we had around Chris Pratt's character because we realized that the whole ship was malfunctioning, and if he hadn't woken her up, everyone would have died. So it was actually a good thing that he did. Lawrence Fishburne woke up sick, so he wouldn't have been able to do it. And in the final act of the movie, it took both of them working together to fix the ship. So If it hadn't gone exactly like it had gone, everyone would have died. This is a little cheap. It's a little Hollywoody. It's meant to help us like Chris a little bit more and understand that there's a lot of gray areas with stuff like this. I don't think it was enough because people still hate him. Even at this point in the movie, 2 hours in, after he did his horrible thing so long ago, it's really weird that this didn't help people to see it in a different light. Whatever. But the last thing that it did, and this is the most important thing that last third of the movie did, it helped her character, Jennifer Lawrence, get a little taste of what it's going to be like to actually live and die alone on the spaceship. He's out there, the thing malfunctions, the door malfunctions, she has to hit that button and kill him in order to save the whole ship. And she even says, she says, no, I'm not, we'll both die. We'll both die together. She was ready to die for him right there and then, just because she was finally facing the prospect of that lifetime alone. And he finally talked her into it by appealing to her sense of morality and saying, no, the whole ship, 5,000 people are going to die. You have to do this. That was the first time that she really put herself in that situation and thought about, oh my God, what would it be like if I actually had to live the rest of my life all by myself and die alone on this ship? Because, and this is where these sanctimonious moral shitheads are. Oh, it was wrong for him to do that. In concept, yeah, it was wrong for him to do that. In reality, when you're faced with that choice, you do not know what you're going to do until you're there. And I hate it when people think they do. And it was so neat to see the character go through that, Jennifer Lawrence's character, to go from hating him to actually kind of understanding a piece of what he was going through. Would she, in turn, wake someone up if she was put in the same situation, even after what had happened? Maybe. It's really, really interesting. And even Lawrence Fishburne's character didn't really blame the guy. He was just like, dude, a year, that's a long time. This guy's military. He understands what isolation. That's why solitary is a form of punishment. Humans just cannot be happy alone. So my thoughts on the last third of the movie were that those three things that I mentioned needed to get accomplished. There might have been a different way to do it. Bringing in Lawrence Fishburne so late, it felt a little, I don't know. It was like that scene where he's standing in front of the tree. Who planted a tree on my bridge? I'm like, who's this guy? Let the two of them do their thing. The chemistry between those characters was just so amazing. And for him to show up, it felt like the party was over. So maybe there was some other way to do it. Some other way to get them talking to each other without having to turn it into a disaster movie. But, for all the criticism that got, it didn't feel jarring to me. It was set up really well. Like from the very first scene in the movie, you saw an asteroid hit the ship. You saw that there was a malfunction. Obviously, something went wrong because his pod opened in the first place. There's computer glitches all through this story. This was not Deus Ex Machina crap. I mean, this was set up and it was really well thought out. And the action sequence was short. It was just a little bit. It was 10 minutes, and it was just enough to get a feeling for how heroic he really was and how he could be in that situation. To see how much the characters cared about each other, for her to get a taste of what it's like to face the prospect of living alone. I don't know. It was good. It was really good. And then, of course, at the end, he gives her the choice. He says, hey, now that we've got his access card, we can put you back into the med bay. And she, of course, says no, would rather get married. And she learned that lesson. She learned that it doesn't matter what the things are that you're doing. What matters is that you're doing them with someone you love, someone you care about. And I'm a real romantic, and I'm a really strong believer in that. So it was a cool movie to see, to underscore that. I always love sci-fi movies because they set things way in the future or way in some alternate dimension, but they show that people are people, that there's still love, there's still fighting, there's still war, there's still all of these things that we struggle with now that we struggled with thousands of years ago. It makes me feel connected to my ancestors. I think about the way I love my girlfriend, and I think about how, 2,000 years ago, there was some guy in Rome who felt the same way about some Italian girl for very different reasons, but this feeling I have in my heart is the same as that guy. It's just neat to think about the human experience and how that part will never change, no matter how much technology we have or where we travel. We just want to pair off and be happy and do fun things with the people we love. And I don't know, I think that's a beautiful message, and it comes through in the movie. You know, there were a couple other reviews that bashed the movie because they said it was derivative of what? There was like a Shining reference. It reminded me of 2001. It reminded me of Aliens, of course, because alone in space and in cryopods and all that. But you know, like, name a sci-fi movie that doesn't have like cryopods and isolation in space and like some disaster happening. Dude, it's 2018, right? It's all been done. Like, every movie from now on is gonna remind you of something else that has come before. Like, this one actually did something different. It was new in a derivative sort of way, but it was new. So one of my favorite websites for movie reviews, I'll put the link in the description. This guy, I don't always agree with him, but I always appreciate what he says. And he's a professional reviewer whose review I actually liked. He gave the movie 3 out of 4 stars, which I think is fair. This is not a masterpiece to end all time. This is not Citizen Kane. This is not Scarface. It's just a little thought experiment. But it happens to be something on a topic that's really near and dear to me. So if I were reviewing it, I'd give it 3.5 or even 4 stars out of 4 because it's personal. But for any professional reviewer to give it less than 3 out of 4, I think it's just a real disservice. And I think there's folks that are not watching this movie because of it. And I hope that if you saw the movie that your enjoyment wasn't dampened by the fact that it's getting a lot of hate for some reason. People are calling it cheesy, and it's just another love movie in space. Don't miss the points that it's trying to make about solitude and the human condition and the power of love and the fact that just doing everyday mundane things with someone you love makes them better. That's a beautiful thing. So I hope you enjoyed my spin on the movie. There was more spoilers in this than there would normally be. I try to give spoiler-free talks on films. If you want to check out any of my other stuff, anything that has spoilers in it will be clearly marked as such. Until then, Paul signing off. Thanks for listening.